Welcome back, one and all. I am doing my series on practical typography from Butterick's practicaltypography.com. And I want to look at headings because headings is a big thing in web pages. Headings can be very helpful. Search engines will use headings to help determine how to find content and whether content is relevant or not. So it's very important that you make good use of headings. And this particular article is really excellent. I completely agree with a lot of it. And the premise of this one is that you add fewer levels and aim for a little subtler emphasis. And the idea here is that there are two problems. One is a structural problem with headers, and the other is typographic. And honestly, if you deal with the structural, you'll do a lot better with your websites and your typography on your web pages. So the idea here is that a lot of times writers will use too many levels of headings. So they basically create this giant outline. And then as you go from a heading level 2 to a heading level 3 to a level 4, by the time you're on a heading level 5, you're just like, you're trying to make it stand out, make it look like a header, not like your paragraph, and it just becomes a problem. So we're going to go ahead and use this. I agree. And there's a couple things about headers I would like to go through here. There's a couple things on here. Notice their guideline. This is what I use all the time. Limit yourself to 3 levels of headings. That means in your style sheet, and let's go ahead and take a look at the style sheet we've been working on. In our last tutorial, we hit the body, we hit page. Now we're going to hit headers. And we're going to go ahead and target the 3 main headers, H1, H2, H3. Now, you could go to further, and the reason why is that H1 is intended for titles, but my opinion is if you go to H4, you've gone too deep in your level of headers. So really all you need is 3. And what we're going to do is we're also going to just target just our H1 and H2 and possibly H3 to make any other changes we want to. And the idea here is anything that's all encompassing that all of our headers will use, we're going to go ahead and apply them here to all 3 of the headers. And then if we want to make it different on a header 1 versus 2 or 3, we can do so. Okay, so there's our setup in the HTML, and we're pretty much ready to go. And let's talk a little bit about some other structural problems they talk about. Is that number one, headers shouldn't just be placeholders. That's great to start off, but when you're actually working on your page and you have content, don't use, title or introduction or main point. Instead, do something that's more descriptive. This is also what I said is important about headers and how search engines will use the content in the header. This is another reason why you don't want to have it generic. You want to keep focusing on that. There's another thing on here, and that is avoid. We're going to take a look at, we're just going to jump to the first one. Let me go back a step. We're going to look at all caps. Now, all caps are fine for headings that are shorter than 1 line, but otherwise you want to avoid them and avoid title case. Title case is where you capitalize the first letter of each case because that's for a title. And for the header 1, if that's the title of your page, then it makes sense. Make it title case where the first letter of each word is capitalized. But for all other, any subheaders, which are talking about heading 2 or whatever, that don't make them title case. And so if you want to do all caps, I'll show you how to do that if you insist. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So if you want to make all of your headers uppercase, you can put them in here. I recommend not doing that. And so I might make the header 1 uppercase, and that's using text transform. So half of your properties are related to text, the others related to font. So keep that in mind. And if you can see here, there's capitalized would be for the title. So you could go ahead and put that in there. If you notice on my header 1 over on the left, I already capitalized it because it is a title. But if you want to make it uppercase, like so, text transform uppercase, let's take a look at what our page looks like. Okay, so I opened my page, and here it is, Essential Languages of Web Design, HTML. Now notice that took up 2 lines, and so that's breaking that guideline. So even though you can do it, In this case, it's not wise based on the size of our font. And I think a lot of it had to do with changing the font size up here to 110%. Okay. All right. But anyway, so that's, at least you know how to do that. I'm going to leave that up there for a moment. We'll play around with the font. I'm not done with headers, so this may resolve itself as we proceed and go forward. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. Don't underline. That's obvious in a web page because underline typically is for hyperlinks, and you don't want to confuse people. And then another one is don't center your text. Now, centering is, it's one of those things that students, oh, my students just love to do all the time. If you're going to do it, there are some exceptions. And so there are a couple of times, but you kind of have to go all in or all out because it looks really weird if some are centered and some are not. Let me just show you what I mean. And of course, this would be text align. And we try center on our header 1 and save our changes. And let's take a look and see what the page looks like. We'll hit refresh. And yeah, it's just one of those where it kind of breaks it up. Let's go ahead and try it on all of them and just see what that looks like if all of our headers have a text transform or a text align of center. We'll save our changes and we'll hit refresh. And you know, it's probably okay, but the main thing is don't ever center your paragraphs. That it hurts your readability. That's not what we're aiming for here. Okay, so I'm going to leave that up there, even though in the article you can read more about it over here. Okay, so I decided to go here anyway, and the exception to centering is the occasional headline or title. All right. So anyway, there you have it. Now, the next step is the best way to emphasize a heading is by putting space above and below because it's both subtle and effective. All right, so let's take a look at that. The first thing you're going to notice about space above and below is there already is space above and below. And the reason why that is, I'm going to go ahead and hit the developer tool, which is F12, and I'm just going to hover over this. You can see that there's already margin being applied. And it's actually quite a lot of margin. So above and below, we have that going on there. And the one thing I would say is if you're going to play around at this, right now it's even, the same amount above as below. If anything, I would reduce the amount below and maybe keep the amount above the same size. So if anything, I would reduce the margin on there. And let me just show you what I recommend you try. And so we're going to go ahead and do a margin. And we're going to do the shorthand where you have a top, bottom, left to right. And so on the top, we're going to give it, probably give it like a 1 EM. We'll just see what this looks like in a 0.5 EM. I'm sorry, left, right, sorry, 0.5 EM and 0. So what we're doing here is that top margin of 1 EM, bottom one of 0.5 EM. And then left and right are 0 and 0. So we save our changes, and we go back over here and hit refresh. And what that did is it pulled it a little bit closer to the paragraph below. Interestingly enough, the paragraph actually has some margin as well, and actually the paragraph gives it more of a margin. But in this case, we separate just a little bit more out between what came above it versus what comes after it. So that is one thing that you may wish to do. And you can even pull that back in a little more. One of the things you'll find is that you can experiment with that, and it's not like a hard and fast rule. So we're going to move on to the next one. And the next one is, where were we? We were talking about point size is the next one. All right, you can make the point size bigger, but just a little, and use the smallest increment necessary to make a visible difference. So if your text is set in 12 point, you needn't go up to 14 or 15. Try an smaller increase of like from 12 to 12.5 or 13. So in light of this, I've come up with I think is a pretty decent system that's kind of keeping the same thing in mind. And one of the ways we're going to test it out is that we're going to go ahead and on here, get the developer tool again. And we're going to get the computed size of the font here. So this is the header 1. And we're going to go to the computed size. And on the font size, you will see that that's 33 pixels. So it's actually bigger than we really want it to be. And on and that was a header 2 actually. And we go up to header 1, it's even going to be more. On header 1 computed size, font size. Oh, it's 33 pixels. Interesting that the header 1 is the same size as the header 2. Actually, we do want to change that. So knowing that that's 33 pixels, and that is a difference from 33 between that and 22. So that's a huge increase. We just like added 11 pixels from paragraph up to our headers. I have discovered that if you're going to go here, I would target the header 1, 2, and 3. And so we're going to do font size. Remember I told you there's font size and there's font related, text related. We're going to make this 130% for our header 1, and we're going to make it 120% for our header 2. Let me go ahead and tab that over. Not 1200. There we go. 120 and then 110. So that as you get closer to header 3, they get closer to the size of the font. We're going to save our changes, and we're going to go back here and take a look. There we go. So our header 1. Now notice the first thing I notice is that by scaling them back a little bit, you'll notice the header 1 now fits on that line. So that's good too. There's our header 2s. Let's see if I'm going to add a couple header 3s on here just so you can see what they look like. Okay, I have added header 3 to break up our paragraphs under the header 2. And I'm not recommending you do that necessarily, but now you can sort of see how the size gets a little bit smaller each time. Let's just take a look at it. But you can also see how this centering can kind of be a little bit goofy at times. Let's just go ahead and get our computed font size for each of these. We'll start with the header 2. Get to our header 2, and we'll go to computed font size. And on here, we're looking at 26.4. Go to header 3, 24.2 from 20. You may want to play around with the differences on there. And let's just go ahead and take one more look at our header 1 and see that's 28. So you see how they're each incrementing by a little bit, not nearly as much as before. And then while we were talking about the centering, here's what it looks like all centered, all our headers. I really don't care for that. And so let's just take the text-align center out of it all. Save our changes and hit refresh. And yeah, so it's going to be a personal matter as to whether you want to keep that or not. You may also want to deal with these margins on the headers as well and scaling them even, back a little bit more. And so you can play around with those. Okay, well, actually, as far as our CSS goes, we're pretty much done. There's only use 2 levels of indenting. So if you're going to indent, I don't like to indent anyway. I would rather just have an up and down space between them. And then there's a suppress hyphenation in headings. So you don't hyphenate your words. Keep lines together. Keep with the next paragraph options. So try not to let your headings break across the pages. So really, it could be an idea of scaling them to fit the right size. Not only that, but also trying to make sure that you don't make them too long anyway. And so that's one of the ways that we can deal with that. So basically we're done. The only thing we haven't talked about is if we want to add another font. In our last tutorial, we added Railway as one of our fonts. Let's go ahead and add one more, and we'll add it to all of our headers just to see how that looks. And by the way, you notice this, by the way, they had a little underline on there. If you want to add an underline to that, you can do that with a bottom border if you want. And so that's another thing you might want to try. So we'll just do border, bottom, and we'll just do like a 1px double, and then we're just going to do like a gray color. So we're not going to do exactly black. So I'll just do a 3, 3, 3 like this, 3 3s. And we'll go back here, we'll hit refresh on the page, and now you've got these underlines on here. We could pull them off and just deal with our header 2s. So I kind of like that, but I don't like it on there on every one of our headers. So sometimes just too much is too much. We're just going to not put it on header 1 because that's our title, not put it on header 3 because we try not to go to header 3 anyway. And then now we've got a section. So what is HTML? HTML elements. And then HTML syntax. And you can do other things with that as well. And but that's just one other piece. So let's go ahead and add our fonts. So we're going to go back to the Google Fonts if I still happen to have that open and I'm not seeing it. So I'm going to have to go grab it. Okay, in the last tutorial, we went to Railway, and I'm actually going to go visit Railway because as you scroll down, you can take a look at the different types of Railway we can play around with. And if you go over here, you have popular pairings with Railway. And what you can do is this would be Railway as a header. This would be it as just paragraphs. You could do Playfair, Display. You could use Lobster. I'm not a big fan of Lobster. You could do Open Sans, Condensed. You would want to put that. That might be an interesting one for headers to get that more subtle effect. I'm going to go ahead and try this. And so I'm just going to click the plus sign here. And now before we had Railway, and I closed it because I wasn't there. So I need to make sure that on Railway I add that one as well. Crap, I lost that. So anyways, I want to get Railway as well. Here, I'll just do it this way. I'll just create 2 link tags. Not a big deal. So I'm going to go ahead into here, and I want to go to this page, hit enter, paste it in, save my changes, and then in all of my headers, I'm going to change it to this particular font. And this is another sans serif font, so if you want to, you can try a different breakdown where you have other fonts that you have from Mac and PC. So you could try, for example, Verdana and Palatino. And in that way, we have a font stack, so we can pull from a Microsoft or a Mac font that's somewhat similar that is sort of the equivalent in case this ever gets broken. You want to save your changes on both pages. Let's go back and take a look at the final product. Hit refresh. It's a little too condensed for my taste, so I think I'll go back here and change that. And instead of that particular one, we'll try the Josephine slab. Yeah, let's try that one. And we could see what it looks like if we go like not a regular italic. We could try a semi-bold. Yeah, let's just try this particular one. But you get the idea is how you do it. You know how to do it now. You just add to your font here. And I'll just copy it here. I'm going to replace that link, save my changes, and then add this Josephine slab and just replace the other one. Save my changes, hit refresh. You know how to do this, so a lot of this is, figuring out which ones you want to do for that. That's not bad. Everything fits. I kind of like it. And it's up to you how you want to do it. Now you know how to do it. You know some of these techniques, and I'm just going to leave you with the code that you can just take a look at, and you can sort of pause. So I just want to focus on the headers and what we did there. All right, well, if I have another one, I will bring it to you. For now, this series has kind of come to a very short end, but stay tuned. I'll have other videos on web design and other related design topics, so stay tuned for those.